Madam Manager, you are live with your guests and on YouTube and our YouTube channel.
Okay, right now I'm seeing Sherry and I'm seeing Daniel. How are you guys? Oh, there's more people. Okay, everybody's fine. Oh, Shannon, Mr. Spicer. I don't get to see your face, but I see that you're on the call. So we're gonna give it a couple minutes just to let some folks dial in before I start. So it's so nice to see you guys. I have missed you. I miss your face, Sherry.
Are we allowed to talk? Can you?
You can. Everything's being recorded, so be careful what you say. This is all being live streamed to YouTube.
Oh, good. Good.
So we don't get to be ourselves completely.
I mean, usually these sessions are not recorded at all.
Right. I know.
Oh, no,
This is just kind of, usually it's people who are really interested about understanding numbers, they really only showing up.
Right. I don't know if they're all going to show up right now, but because people had to register ahead of time to come in, they had to provide their email information, and we had like 20 people say they were interested. So I don't know if all of them will show up, but
That's a huge number.
For us, yes, you know how this goes. Hi, John.
20 people. Wow. I think the max number, usually we really have maybe 5 people.
Right.
I think we maybe have, the last year, like
Hi,
we
John.
had like.
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you?
Thank you very much for the email this morning. Well, last night.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I found out some more information. I'll tell you afterward on the whole statistics on the police department stuff that we were talking about. So I was just going to give it like another maybe 2 or 3 minutes just to let people dial in before I start, so we don't necessarily have to repeat ourselves. But like I was mentioning, we have about 20 people that said they were going to call in and that are interested in participating. And some of you I've had meetings with over the years, and you know what happens in this meeting. Others are new, so I'm excited to see new faces. So I'll go through my introduction as soon as we let some people, Guido, are you noticing they're having trouble getting on? And on mine, it says John Steinbauer and Scott Baxter are having issues connecting to audio.
That would be they're having an issue on their devices, okay. Or their devices may not have audio or video.
Oh, John Steinbauer, can you hear me?
He doesn't have a microphone, so he can't respond to you.
Okay. All right. So
there's no one else in the waiting room.
There's no one else on the waiting room. Okay. So if you don't have a microphone and you want to ask me questions, if you've never used Zoom, there's a little toggle on the bottom that you can hover your mouse over and see where there's a chat function, and you can always text me questions and I'm happy to answer. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yaslan Galeano. I'm the village manager. I have the distinction of overseeing the functions of the village operations, all the departments, and the council is the oversight legislative board that supervises myself and 2 other charter officials. What we're doing tonight, I call a town hall meeting. It's basically an overview of what is going to be discussed by council at their budget workshops and then their hearings, which will take place in September. What we have as part of the agenda package that was distributed to council, which was the proposed budget. Those documents were supplied to the council back in July, and we have actually more updated numbers as that I'm going to provide to you tonight, that in fact the council hasn't even seen yet. They're going to be getting the revised pages for their budgets tomorrow in anticipation of a workshop that they're going to have next week. So you'll have the benefit of knowing the latest figures. Just to give you some information, yes, Daniel, go ahead. You're on mute. Yeah, you're on. Yeah, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. My question is, which numbers and which pages you are referring to in the budget?
We're going to be replacing, and I'll go over the numbers that I'm going to give you the details of what's different from the published document, so you have those numbers, but I'll give you also the overall impact on the budget. Okay. just because we haven't published it. But if not tomorrow, that will be published because they'll be getting their packets tomorrow, and then they'll have those additional pages.
So whatever you're going to explain us today with new numbers, you're going to republish this current document so we can actually see everything.
It'll be published tomorrow.
I don't have to make every notes on everything. Yeah, if I have understanding where you made the changes, after that I will be able to really like put it together.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Tomorrow it'll be there. Okay. They're not a lot of changes, but the amounts that got changed are big because we had, and just so you know, what ends up happening is when we do our forecasting back in July, or before in June rather, for council to get their numbers in July, sometimes we still are waiting on numbers from the state that the Department of Revenue at the state provides us information, and sometimes it's behind and the timing just doesn't work when we're first putting the budget together. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to share screen today. This is going to be actually easier for you to see everything because now I can point to it and we're going to share screen. So I'm going to do first a PowerPoint presentation that gives you some just overview of the whole thing. And then we'll dive into, can you see what I'm sharing, the PowerPoint presentation? Yeah, okay, perfect. All right, so let's get started. All right, so in this screen, what you will see is a snapshot over our history since we've incorporated of the millage rates. The millage rate is the rate that is charged for every $1,000 of taxable value. So in the village, if you notice this chart, the highest mill rate that we've ever had in our history, in our almost 25-year history, is the 2.4. Currently, what I'm proposing to the council is maintaining the millage at the same rate, which is just shy of that 2.4 at 2.399, which is the same rate we've had since 2018. Are there any questions on this slide?
Can I ask questions? Because I don't know, some of those questions regarding the mill rate, I wanted to just, because you will have later, on when we go through the documents, maybe you will have additional comment regarding the mill rate. Or if I have any question regarding the mill rate, I should address it here.
Yeah, you can ask me as we go through. What I usually do is I'll go through my presentation. I mean, you can always interrupt me halfway and then I'll answer. Otherwise, some of the stuff might be addressed when I do my presentation.
So that was because you asked the question and usually just you go through your presentation and after we go to the questions, but you actually started to ask questions.
Yeah, so I'm asking questions because I see a lot of people that aren't familiar. And so some of you are experts at this and you know what's coming. Others I've never had in my presentation before, but yeah, typically I could do it either way. I just don't want people to feel that they can't ask a question if they have it right then and there.
Okay, because I have questions, but I wanted to make sure that, especially on the mill rate, in context of other items, but I wanted to make sure you go through the whole thing, and I wanted to come back to the mill rate later.
Yeah, we can always come back. That's not a problem.
Okay, I wanted to, from my perspective, I am okay with going through this way, that I'm not interrupting with questions. I'll just let you go through it, and after we
okay.
reiterate.
Right. Very good.
Yeah. Okay.
This slide is shows you basically where we land in comparison with other municipalities and unincorporated Dade County, which is considered UMSA. So what you'll notice here is that all these different entities up here, you have unincorporated county tax, you have school millage rate, you have, South Florida Water Management District, Everglades Project, the Okeechobee Basin, the Florida Inland Navigation District. All these different entities are all taxing jurisdictions. What you'll see in this column, the first column, is what the village charges in its millage rate. And what you see in these last two columns here is what you paid for every $1,000 of taxable value when you add all the taxing jurisdictions together. So you, as Pinecrest residents, were paying last year $18.17 roughly for every $1,000 of taxable value. And in the next, what's being proposed by all the taxing jurisdictions, including Pinecrest, will total $18.12, roughly 13 cents for 2020. So overall, the residents of Pinecrest, if all these rates stay the same through the public hearings for each of these jurisdictions, you'll be paying a lesser millage rate than the prior year. Any questions on this? And these are ranked, this is ranked by the highest to the lowest. So we are, as you can see here, how we compare to other cities. Just want to mention, just as a general point of information, which some of you already know, in the case of like Sunny Isles Beach, Aventura, Bar Harbor, and Key Biscayne, they're all they all have similar land use types. You have a lot of condominiums. Those kinds of developments tend to generate a higher taxable value as a general sense, which is why typically cities that have that type of land use will have a lower mill rate. In Doral, you have a lot of commercial area. There's a lot of industrial and commercial. That type of land use also is very specific in how it generates large tax base. And then obviously Miami Lakes, Palmetto Bay are more similar in nature to Pinecrest as having more residential land use character like we have.
You'll see, I only have one issue with this presentation, and I have all the time, that you actually rank it based on the millage rate for the local entities. And in this case, Coral Gables look like 5.5 and we 2.399. But Coral Gables actually for that same amount effectively provides the fire department.
And that's included in here. See, what you'll notice is, like in Key Biscayne, their mill rate is high because their fire rescue is built into this amount here. But then you'll see that in the fire rescue column, that's missing. So any city that has their own fire rescue will be missing the mill rate here. So Coral Gables, so I'm not ranking on this column, I'm ranking on the total millage column. Okay.
But I understand the ranking is that way, but I'm saying that you sort it this way.
I sorted it right.
So you done that way, which can be misleading a little bit, but I'm saying it that we really have to look the last one, because municipalities differs what service they provide.
Right, but even if you look at, for example, on just the cities by themselves, you'll notice that that Pinecrest is still they're still in order. At least up to Cutler Bay, they're all, with the exception of Key Biscayne, obviously. So we still fall, even if you did it solely on the city's millage rate, we still are one of the lowest mill rates. Any questions on this slide? Okay. The next slide is where we start getting into the nitty gritty of the budget. As I mentioned, these numbers are updated numbers. And so they are going to be a little bit different than what you saw in the budget message, in my budget message, but I'll go over those, the differences. So the proposed general budget for next year, including all transfers, is $25,256,430. And later on, we'll have other slides where you can see what it was last year in comparison and what we're, the last 3 years. You'll see actuals for 2 years, last year, the current, and then the next year. So that'll shed a little bit more light too. We've we're expecting to see an increase in revenues over last year's budget, a very minimal, less than 1%, 0.05% increase in revenue overall. From an expenditure standpoint, we are expecting 2.7% decrease in expenditures from last year's revised budget, which is the current year we're in right now. So when you see last year's, we're actually in the last year's budget. So this is what we're proposing for next year is an overall decrease of 2.7%. When we look at the numbers, which we'll do later in more detail, you'll notice that the most significant departmental increase occurred in the building and planning department. And that increase is mostly attributed to our including 2 new part-time positions and adding additional funding for outsourced inspectors. Although we're seeing a decrease in the permit activity for construction, we are seeing an increase in the inspection side of the functions that require additional staff to maintain good level of service. The second highest departmental increase occurred in the Information Technologies division. Information Technologies is what handles everything having to do with computer systems and whatnot. Last year, we due to cybersecurity concerns, we started to shift all our operations into cloud-based systems. But with that come costs, the maintenance costs for doing all of that have increased our budget and our, which has translated about $66,000 increase for that department. Okay, so macro view of what's happening with the taxable value. Our taxable value, in other words, when you look at the cost of all the properties or the value, the taxable value of all properties from prior year to this coming year, we are anticipating, or we've seen an increase of 3.22% in taxable value. Okay, so what does that mean? When you look at revenues for the village, we have the largest revenue source for the village is ad valorem taxes. Because you see an increase in the taxable value, that is going to then translate into an increase in that comes from ad valorem taxes if you do not roll back the rate. Okay, we're not proposing roll back the rate. So when we get into notifying people of their tax burden, it comes out as a tax increase because we are not we're not rolling back the rate. We're just maintaining the millage rate the same. So we benefit from the increase in taxable value that generates additional new revenue to the tune of $295,000 roughly. Then you have other categories of revenue. Some have been more affected than others because of the current pandemic and all the effects that's had. So we'll go through how those different categories have been affected. So the building related permit activity, in the revenues that those typically would generate are expected to decrease by $400,000. Public works related permit activity is going to be down about $4,000 total. Utility taxes are expected to increase $200,000. Intergovernmental revenues are down as a category by approximately $100,000, mostly due to decreases in the state revenue sharing and also decreases in the local half-cent sales tax by the tune of $187,000. On the positive side, in that category of intergovernmental revenues, we are going to be receiving $101,000 of COVID grant for police. So that offsets the decreases in some of the other line items. Charges for services, which is typically what we charge. Charges for services, Angela, remind me, it's is that the zoning? Yeah, zoning and land use type charges. We're expecting to be down because construction is expected to come down. We are also expecting decreases in revenues that have to do with programs at all our parks, at the community center and Pinecrest Gardens. And we'll go over that a little bit more when I get into more detail about the budget. And then, so overall, from this current year, which we refer to as the previous year, to what's being proposed, we are only seeing a revenue increase of about $12,295. Okay, let me just double check. some of those new numbers have changed some of these numbers. So at
I
the
want
end,
to, can you tell me, Yossi, which one is numbers is changed? Because I'm a
Yeah,
little bit,
so-
I want to reconcile the numbers.
new revenue increases provide, from the revenue perspective, an additional $167,955 out of the half-cent sales tax. There's an additional 51,965 in the community services, communication services tax, and an additional 103,445 in revenue sharing. So from a revenue perspective, we had those increases.
The ad valorem tax budget line has been changed. Am I
Ad
correct?
valorem is exactly the same.
Okay.
Ad valorem, when we budget, by the way, is budgeted at 95%. We don't budget 100%.
I know you always, that's the reason we always have some surplus because we
Correct.
collect it anyway.
Right.
Question for you is really kind of the relationship between the revenue decrease on the permitting side of 400K and you have an additional cost of 260K
Right.
on the permitting, on the inspection side.
Right.
I mean, I really feel that it's kind of a little bit of disconnect here. And I understand the reasoning, some of the reasoning, because you have to really outsource it because we're not able to really keep anybody on the payroll. But don't you feel this kind of, if you have that much of decrease in revenue side, should not impact also the cost side also? So why we actually...
No, because remember, there's always a lag. So we've collected on the permits, but in some cases, construction can take 2 or 3 years to complete. And the amount of inspections that generates, we still have to provide that service. And so
I got you. I understand. No, I understand. But in this case, I mean, I understand exactly what you're talking about. This actually deferred revenue situation. Shouldn't you actually allocate this way, like having a deferred revenue concept in these revenues? Because we actually, you know what you do, you're booking all those revenue, but you actually have not done the job, what is related to this. So,
right. So what ends up happening, and we're in fact, as part of the budget, when we go into council and one of the budget hearings, we're going to be presenting a recommended schedule of fee change for the building and planning department that starts taking into consideration overhead costs and starts to build within that, because the building and planning department specifically, the way it's supposed to work, it's supposed to pay for itself. And
yes,
so
usually that's the reason I'm not worried about if you have more cost,
right.
Because usually always you pay for it. So it really effectively is
right.
zero cost, effectively it's making money for us. So.
Right, but what we're doing now, we're gonna keep that, we're gonna start building a separate like reserve for that particular department, so it doesn't get sucked into general fund.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to actually
right.
recommend.
That's happening.
Like having because I know that this is a fund accounting, so you really cannot do, deferred revenue.
Right.
Because there's no deferred revenue in fund accounting, but you could actually create a different, allocated funds for that purposes to separate it that way.
And that is
because in this case provides more visibility, everybody,
right.
what is actually happening, how the costs and revenues.
So what we found when we redid our study, which we're still in the process of finishing up all the other fees like public works fees and planning fees, but what we found was that we were actually subsidizing those costs. It wasn't being passed on to the developer. So this new fee structure should fix that. And then we're going to have this system where we set aside the funding. Any surplus for that department will be set aside for what's happening right now, where you see these fluctuations.
Okay, I just wanted to have this, have this discussion about that one.
Okay, perfect. All right. So possible fiscal stability impacts for those of you who have sat through my presentation before, you'll know that there are things that are constantly on the background that could potentially have a negative impact on what we're anticipating will be our revenue projections. The one new thing in here is obviously the coronavirus pandemic. In preparation of this budget, what we do, and I do personally, is a whole lot of research. I spend over a month doing, research, analysis, economics. I go through everything from the Congressional Budget Office's forecasting. I start looking at every possible economic forecast that's being put out by universities, any kind of studies, to try to get a handle on what is anticipated as far as the impacts to the economy because of the pandemic. With certain assumptions in place, what is expected to occur is that the economic downturn because of the coronavirus pandemic will be felt for the next 2-year period. So we'll be still having some effects of the economic downturn for 2 more years going into the future. So for the fiscal year 21 and for fiscal year 22. And those assumptions are already built into our numbers and our forecast. We forecast over a 5-year period and up to 10-year period when we look at what's going to happen in the future from a financial perspective. In addition to that, outside of those assumptions that we've already anticipated, there's things that we have zero control over, but that constantly are in the background that could potentially be a variable that would impact our forecasts in the future. That includes anything that the state legislature might do that would impact the local communication services tax. That's something that they've continuously tried to do, and they never get enough traction to actually pass the laws to reduce it or eliminate the communication services tax. But if the legislature ever did anything like that and affected that revenue source, that would impact us by the tune of over $700,000. So that's a huge issue. The other thing that is a recurring theme, but again, has not gotten final traction in the legislature, is doing away with red light camera programs. Our red light program for this coming year we are anticipating some decreases in the red light camera program because there's less people traveling in the streets. So we've already made adjustments for that. But if they were to do away with red light camera programs, that funding source generates about $1 million for the city, for the village. That funding source, the council has decided, is where we pay for capital projects. That money is typically and only used for capital projects. Okay. Additional sales tax holidays that they might want to put in, and anything that there's been efforts to do away with local business taxes, eliminating our ability to charge lobby fees. So anything that the legislature can possibly do that potentially would keep us from collecting revenues we have now. Obviously, we don't have a way of knowing what those might be, but any one of those things can impact our revenues in the future. Okay, so this is a snapshot of what the budget is looking like. These are the revised numbers. So you'll see by department what is being proposed. So the first column that you see here, these are audited numbers. This is what actually happened last year and was spent through September 30th of last year. The second column goes over what we have as a current year's budget. That includes any amendments the councils have done or any adjustments, even mid-year adjustments to the budget. And then the 12-month estimates are what we're anticipating and forecasting we will actually spend for this current year. And then the last column is what's being proposed. So when you look at When you look at this slide, what you'll see is where we've made some cuts. So there's a couple of things that are built in automatically into the budget. And so I'll just mention those to you. We have increases, 5% increases of salaries. Those are already built into the budget figures that were in here that are being presented to council. Already, we've been notified of some savings in the Florida retirement system. The pension amount that the state of Florida is allocating for next year was a decrease. So that's also already built into this budget. We have we have erased or diminished completely any travel type expenditures, because we anticipate that because of the virus, nobody's going to be traveling. So we took all of the travel expenditures, any conference fees, anything that would be involved in the traveling of any employees, out of the budget. We did away with a large amount of our community festivals and events and all those associated expenditures. So I'm going to just go real quickly through the departments to highlight the big differences between the current year and next year's budgets. So in the village council's budget, and if you don't mind, let me just grab the big book so I can do this while we're going through it. In the village council's budget, the largest, we decreased travel and per diem for the council. They typically had a much larger budget assigned to them for travel and per diem, but we're anticipating minimal travel and per diem. So that was decreased by about $15,000. We've decreased the costs that were associated with expenditures for in-person meetings, which are no longer going to be occurring, or we're anticipating not occurring next year. And then the state of the village event, which typically was a reception type event, that's also been removed from the budget. And so that's how we got to the decrease from 193,000 to 160,000 for the village council. In the village manager's budget, we're seeing roughly a $10,000 increase to the budget. Without getting into the details, which we can, if anyone's interested, we can go through all of these. But if you've had a chance to go through the actual big document, it gives you in sections for each department that's called budget highlights. It'll tell you exactly how these numbers were gotten to, where the savings were and whatnot. So we had, let's see if I can pick up anything here that was significant. We did away with travel and per diem, and we decreased in the conference fees, as I mentioned. So the increase in here is completely tied in the manager's office to the salary, the 5% salary increase. What's not included in my budget, in the manager's budget, or in the village clerk's budget, and we never do this when we recommend to council, neither myself nor the clerk recommend our own salary increases. So depending on whether council wants to provide any increases to the clerk or I, that number may go up further than this. So the increases in those two departments only reflect increases to other employees, not myself or the city or the village clerk. In the village clerk's department, you'll see there's an increase. This increase is directly tied to the fact that we have an election in November. And whenever we have an election year, the clerk's office is where that expense of that election hits the budget. So that's why you'll see some years are much less, and then you see that fluctuation in the budgets because of that. The finance, I'm sorry?
This is John Stanham. I have a query for you.
Sure.
When I look at these numbers, as I review the budget, all of these, I understand, these are expenses.
Right.
But then the last three lines, Parks and Recreations, Community Center, and the Pinecrest Gardens, they have their own revenues. So the query for you is, are we supposed to sort of, if we have any questions, is this the right forum or is that in the workshop? Because I think here the mindset is not the right one that we have in the village. Those three those are big money losers in the village. They leave a big hole every year.
Correct.
And it's, again, I don't come from the public sector, but more from the private sector. And this would sell all the alarms ringing
Right.
and we'd be flashing red lights.
Right.
You look at these numbers, yes, that's a lot of money, but wouldn't it be fairer to show the net result? Because these generate a big loss every year, and they should be producing money and lots of it.
So let me tell you, in the larger budget book, you'll notice when you look at those departments, the departments that have their own revenue sources,
yes,
will have. Let me just verify that I'm telling you what I'm telling you is accurate.
Yeah, building and planning as well, but building and planning is a different animal. But these other three, they're alternatives to make those big areas of big contribution to the village. And today we're just burning millions year after year.
So let me tell you the philosophy behind it, right or wrong. I won't comment on it. I will tell you that parks in general and anything having to do with cultural functions in a traditional sense for municipal local government is subsidized by the taxpayer. That is typically how municipal government works. Pinecrest in particular, we've always taken a position that is a little more, I guess, a hybrid of the business perspective of these things. But there's you have to balance the two things. Where, local government, and I know this from having worked most of my life in local government, but then going into the private sector for a portion of my career and then returning to local government. We are not profit driven. That's not, we're providing a service. And so profits, while important, are not what drives every decision that's made by the village council, the elected officials. In those three particular functions, and when you look at the strategic plan that the council has adopted, what they've asked of staff is that we always look for ways to fill that gap. In other words, to move to try to find a way to cover the costs and make this either revenue neutral or really decrease the amount of subsidy by the taxpayer, right? And make it more user-based, more user fee-based approach.
Yeah, I don't want to engage in a discussion now on this if this is not the right forum, and if that should be done in the workshop. But my main point is that we're burning about $3 million every year in, year out. And I think that is something that can be a turnaround, and giving some of the bigger long-term issues that we have at the village, that money could well be used for these longer-term priorities. I'm not these are things that are, it's not, you're not taking a human being to the moon and turning these things around, but these are things that I don't see why, as a village, we should not aim to make those cash flow neutral. Would be sort of like, okay, but they should be generating plenty of revenue for the village. I think we're lacking ambition in that sense.
We were heading in that direction. The community center in particular and Parks and Recreation were really, if you look at our numbers and what we were doing over the last 5 years, we were moving. The pandemic kind of just threw everything into a completely different reality. Pinecrest Gardens has always been, just in a general sense, and we can talk a little bit more offline, Mr. Stanham, if you like, on the issue, but
I don't want to, if this is not what this forum was designed for, we can definitely,
Right.
whether maybe it's the workshop or just.
This is more informative, so yes,
Okay.
your comments are better served to the elected officials because they're the ones that decide the policy side of it. But I just want to give you some background of how things are and why they are the way they are, right?
Okay, my apologies, didn't want to
That's
sidetrack.
fine. That's perfectly fine.
Yes.
Daniel, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, but maybe somebody else, I heard it. But I actually have a specific question. I understand this is just the expense side of it and the revenue side of it and a different sheet. So I think it's like, when we're looking at things, like you have to look at like a proper P&L, you know, you have a profit and the loss, and that's how you actually come up with it. So I'm totally fine the breakdown so you can understand it, because so we still, like, if I understood correctly, Yossi, is our ad valorem taxes it's about 11 million and some change is about, so effectively still 90% of our property tax goes to the police because it's like about $10 million. Maybe it went down a little bit. It's like, we think it's 88% today, this next year.
The ad valorem, I think we have let me see, I think the next.
I think it's 11.7 or something like that, and we're paying almost $10 million for the police.
Right, the
so
police. Yeah, I can tell you right
So it's
now.
about 85% actually our taxes actually goes to the police.
Right,
And
the police
the rest
budget
of
was
it,
10, what we're proposing is $10 million for the police, and the ad valorem revenue.
you put it 11.747 if I remember correctly.
11.7, correct. So, yeah, but again, yeah, if you look at this particular, it'll tell you the breakdown of how and the all revenues collectively are spent. The
So
vast majority goes obviously to personal services. Personal services are salaries, benefits, insurance, medical, all those kinds of things.
My question is actually goes to the regarding to the Pike's Garden is, you know, it's very specific to actually the people side of it, the people cost. Because, you know, I see that you really bit decrease the cost spending for next year. But, you know, we actually hired a couple of people for programmings and things like that nature. To be honest, to expand our revenue side, how we can actually hiring people, we are having additional revenue, but some of those people may or may not, we cannot utilize them because we're not able to create the revenue. Did you thought about considering some cuts on the garden side?
No, in fact, the garden and the functions of the garden continue because the majority of the cost of maintaining the gardens, it has to do with the garden, the actual physical plant and what it takes to maintain that particular facility. So the
programming related human resource expenses,
it's all contracted out. And so if we're not doing the program, we don't have the expenditures. So the savings that you see in those come from the doing away of certain programs, but the physical plant, what it takes to maintain that asset doesn't change because it's a living, breathing garden that requires.
No, I know that, but I think if I remember correctly, we actually hired 1 or 2 person regarding having better programming and build up the programs for the cultural programs and everything around that. And I thought that those people that's the reason I asked that. Do you keep those people? That I think is 1 or 2 person. Or
the only people that have to do.
You still keep them on payroll.
Yeah, I'm not recommending furloughing or laying off any employees. All employees are still doing functions of their job. We have, you know, obviously operations managers, facilities managers. There is still programming continuing in these facilities. They're just adjusted to, some of them are virtual, but they're still, you know, you still need to have somebody that coordinates that virtual programming and markets that virtual programming and does all the work to still put those programs together. So
I just wanted to understand the policy. I'm not questioning the
Yeah,
decision
no.
one way or other.
We have adjusted, like I said, there's some things we're definitely not going to do. Like we're not having an art festival next year. So the costs from like an advertising, all those costs that go into these large festivals, those can all be savings. But we are doing programs still that are just reinvented with the pandemic in mind. So we're going to be doing, for example, school, like after school type programs and stuff like that. So all that still needs, you know, somebody to be coordinating and everything. So I would definitely not recommend furloughing or getting rid of.
I mean, for me, the thing is like, you know, I wanted to make sure that we're keeping people, if we keep somebody in our payroll, they're doing something value to our community. I think
No
that's for me
question.
the most kind of a driving principle, that if you're
Right.
keeping on a, if you're not furlough, because I don't want people sitting on a, you know, we just
Right.
being you know, generous community and people keeping on the, you know, on the side, whatever.
No, in fact, the only people that had been staying at home, not working, and that we just shifted that for them were the school crossing guards, because schools are not in service right now. And
Okay.
those people, because they tend to be an older population, have chosen to not come back in, because we actually offered them positions that were open in the parks doing park service aid stuff, maintenance stuff, but they
Okay.
are choosing to stay out. But other than that, everybody, by the way, I know there's a misconception that we're closed. We are all working. We've never stopped working. Every single employee in the village continues to come into work and works every day, if not more now than ever.
No, I don't have such a misconceptions. I know.
Not you, but I'm saying in a general sense, because I've heard that before. Some people thought we were closed, and we're like, no, that we never closed. We're actually working more now because we have our regular job, and on top of that, the pandemic. So it does generate a whole new set of work responsibilities. All right, are there
Okay.
any questions with this slide? This basically gives you just a snapshot of how the money is split out. The majority definitely goes to personal services, and then the other highest is to operating expenditures. Okay. Some of this I already went over, so just to go over again, we recommend maintaining the millage rate at 2.399. Right now, with that maintaining of that millage rate and the changes from on the positive side of the revenues and some savings in the expenditures, we're looking at a surplus, overall surplus, and this will come out in tomorrow's numbers, of $212,745. That will be a surplus at the end of the year next year. We talked about the decrease in the retirement contribution, the addition of some inspectors in the building and planning department. We continue to offer the grants that we always have to the schools, but we did decrease some of the field trip money that was in the budgets, because we're just not anticipating that there'll be a lot of that type of activity, at least for next year. We did leave the Uber transport, Sherry, for the kids, in case they reestablish the little, you know, the Sprout Music program mentorship. So that is still in the budget. Okay, this is a snapshot of how our pensions work in the village. One of the things that we had wanted to do, but it's not going to happen, we were not able to do it, was to reestablish the pensions pre-2008 recession, which was one of the goals that we had anticipated doing. That went out the door with the pandemic, so that's not going to happen. Okay. Proposed capital projects. So the largest recommendation in the budget as a whole. So we have what I would call the day-to-day operations, what we do normally, and then we get into things that are capital projects, which are larger ticket line items that we usually take years to do, and then are the most expensive things that we do outside of just the day-to-day operations. So part of my proposed budget recommends the early retirement of one of our bonds, and I can actually, well, let me go over this and then I'll show you where we are with our debt and all our outstanding bonds. But as part of my proposed budget, I'm recommending retiring a bond that is actually scheduled to finish next in fiscal year 2022. So we would be retiring that bond 1 year early and reissuing a new bond for the same amount of money that that bond was originally issued for, which is about $8 million. Based on that recommendation, if council goes forward with that recommendation, what we're proposing that $8 million be used for is the following. Flagler Grove Park received about $400,000 grant from the state last year. It's a 50-50 match, so it requires the expenditure of the other 50%. So the 100% is spent, and then you get a reimbursement of $400,000 from the state. So the $880,000 is for that project. Sunnyland LED lights. We, in the last bond that we issued, we updated the lights at all our parks with the exception of Sunnyland to LED lights. So that project would be put into the new bond issuance. Evelyn Greer Park, we had in the last older budget, the one that we issued a couple of years ago, we had anticipated doing resurfacing of the playground at Evelyn Greer Park, and then found when we were in the process of pricing that out, that the structure that's out there, because of the tent that was put in after the original playground was built, there's issues of the safety, distances for that playground. So at this point, and there are some features in the existing playground that are in need of repair, but the manufacturer would not provide the repairs because these things are not meeting the safety distances for these playground structures. So in light of all that, we put on hold the resurfacing project, and we're anticipating then and recommending that we go ahead and just replace that whole structure and redo the whole playground at Evelyn Greer Park. And that $145,000 would be the cost of the new equipment. The pour and play surface is already funded. Evelyn Greer Park outdoor sconces for $10,000. Some of the sconces out there are just rusting over time because that facility is already a 20-year-old facility. Coral Pine Park, phase 2 construction documents and the actual construction of phase 2 of the master plan. Back in 2013, the council, when they did their strategic plan, pushed for a master plan for Coral Pine Park that was developed over the years. And then I want to say about, I guess 3 years ago, 3 years ago at this point, 3 years ago, we built phase 1 of the Coral Pine Park master plan. So we would be recommending finishing that project with this new bond issuance. The Upper Garden construction is a project that is affecting an area of Pinecrest that has Pinecrest Gardens that has the existing petting zoo, the playground, restrooms, and a learning garden, sensory garden area. This area of Pinecrest Gardens is the last remaining portion of Pinecrest Gardens that has not undergone some form of revamping since the village purchased the property. We had identified and received grants from the state to do some improvements to the to ADA improvements for the playground structure, improvements to the petting zoo and the restrooms. And we've been working on, we've added a component called the Inspiration Center that came about last year during strategic plan to add that as a amenity to the park. And so we're in the process of doing those construction plans, and then this would be the financing proposal of how to bring those construction plans to actual fruition if council wants to go forward with that project. Pinecrest Gardens lower garden path lighting is a project that's also been identified, and that is going to support some programming in the garden that's going to happen 2 years from now, with large scale art installation in the lower garden. And so this will be putting the lighting infrastructure for the lower garden to support that art installation. Stage monitors for Pinecrest Gardens. Cypress Hall improvement and deck is, this includes funding to complete improvements to the kitchen and storage area in Cypress Hall, and then to build a outdoor deck right outside the folding doors of that particular room. The master plan, we have a multi-year botanical master plan for Pinecrest Gardens. We have $91,000. Oh, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. There you go. Associated for that. Changing garage doors to commercial roll-ups in the garages that are by the parking lot. Replacing hallway lighting. Okay, so here, I'm sorry, there's a double here. This improvement does not include the deck. Down here is the deck. The 85,000 is the deck, and I apologize, that's a typo. And then Pinecrest Gardens AC break room and Banyan mezzanine. These are split units for those two facilities that need replacement of the air conditioning systems. So this is the proposed use of a reissued bond if council goes forward with that. The payments for the debt service for the bonds are already built into the budget. And so at one point, the original proposal would require a 267,000 transfer from reserves for the bond issue to cover the bond issuance. Because of the new changes to the revenues and the savings on the expenditure side, which will be provided, we don't even have to dip into the reserves in order to pay for the early retirement of that bond. Okay. Go ahead.
Can I ask a couple of questions? I am not going to make any kind of comment regarding that. Is it good idea or not good idea? Because I think that's a political discussion, okay?
Right.
So I'm not touching that part. You know, anybody can have its own view. I have my view, which is, but I wanted to have asked, can you go back to the one slide before?
Oh, sorry.
Or when you're actually showing up all those, yeah.
Yeah.
So my question is, what is the usual use cycle for when we build Evelyn Green Park, the playground?
Right. That was 20 years ago.
It was 2000 when we built Evelyn Green Park.
It was Evelyn Greer Park was built. Let me see if somebody on staff can tell me or shoot me a chat.
My biggest thing
is
is
built in
usually
2000 and opened in 2001.
It was opened in 2001. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, because this will be, if I remember, this is a 20-year bond. What you are proposing.
Yes.
So yeah, so I wanted to make sure that anything what we're putting in a capital project like have at least 20-year life cycle, okay? Because otherwise, I think it's like worthless to put in there, because in this case, we're just kidding ourselves regarding about this really a capital investment or not. So
yeah, we've had that conversation in past, and yes, the answer to that is yeah. Evelyn Greer Park's playgrounds were put in when we purchased the park and built it, so we're going on 20 years.
But in due honesty, okay, is it really actually any playground can actually last for 20 years? But it's, I'm just asking it for
ideally, yes, if you buy, it depends on the equipment you buy and the use of it, but for the most part, yeah, I mean, this has lasted 20 years, and quite frankly, if it wasn't for the fact that we wanted to upgrade the surface, we can continue with that playground. If you've been out there, it's not perfect shape, but
I've been there. I know it's not bad actually. So it's not like bad, but
so
okay.
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, our facilities, because we maintain them well, some of these things are extended longer than maybe what most people would think, because perhaps in Dade County, they don't have the same maintenance, but we really do baby our stuff, and we maintain it, and we're constantly fixing anything. So we never let it get out of control, and that extends the life on these things for sure.
But at Pinecrest Gardens, we did have several improvements to the upper garden with the playground. That playground is not 20 years old.
When we purchased that property, that playground was replaced. The old playground, I don't know if you remember, Sherry, was that nasty wood. I think I have weird pictures there from that. So we did replace that playground back then, which would have been when we purchased that property in like 2002. So we're going now on.
But that playground didn't get, I mean, I don't know, but I guess maybe that goes to Daniel's point.
That playground was built when we purchased Pinecrest Gardens in 2002, right?
It would have been right after, right? We purchased it in December of 2002, and that was one of the first things that we did because the other one was too old. So maybe 2003.
Back then, that particular playground, the surface for that playground, what was in back then was what they call fiber, which is what it looks almost like chipped wood. That's what was put there.
I actually know because that's when I moved here.
Uh-huh.
So, and I took my kids there, and I know exactly how it looked like.
Yeah, it was nasty.
They were
it was
2
really
and 5 years old, so I know exactly what happened and how, because we went there all the time.
Yeah, that was really nasty.
It was okay. I mean, I don't think it wasn't that nasty. I mean.
What was there before? Oh my God, I'll show you pictures. If you want to stick around afterwards, I'll show you.
In this case, I have low standards. Okay, whatever. You know what?
I'm happy to show you some of those pictures. They were a little.
I have pictures also with my kids. Come on.
Yeah.
So.
It definitely needed replacement. You know, clearly, you know, the standards of playgrounds have changed a lot. Even when we did our splash and play in Pinecrest Gardens, the surface of the splash and plays now, the newer ones all have the cushiony, you know, in case you fall, don't break your head kind of thing, which didn't exist when we first built that. We were one of the first splash and plays built in
But you'll see
Florida.
those cushiony things going to you know, over time they actually break easier. Okay.
I know.
So they're not going to stick for 20 years. I mean, any cushiony thing it is never going to stay for. That's no service life you can bring out from those things.
Every facility, everything we do, even our large buildings require maintenance. Everything breaks. Nothing lasts in perfect condition for 20 years. Nothing. So that's a given. We know that. That's a function of just, you know, the way.
Yeah. Can you explain what you said earlier for the Pinecrest Garden Cypress Hall improvements?
Yeah.
One of them is 135 and one of them is 85. The 85 is for the outside deck area.
Yeah, this deck is wrong. This here where it says deck is not correct. What this is, if you remember, Sherry, I think you were still on the council when we went in to redo the kitchen to allow for actual cooking instead of catering. We hired architect that came in and did some construction plans to redo the kitchen and add some storage, new storage, like build out the back of that room for storage. The council provided funding for, how much was it, Angela, last year's budget? And then when we did the plans, and came up with the construction costs of the estimates for that, the amount they're recommending for construction, we haven't gone out to bid because we haven't moved the project yet. Council has to decide to go ahead and do this. But the anticipated construction cost for that is actually $250,000. So we have part of the money set aside that we're carrying over from one year to another. This would finish that pot of money to total the $250,000 that we anticipate will be the cost to do the kitchen in Cypress Hall and the added storage in Cypress Hall. The $85,000 is strictly for a deck in the outside part. So like if you were to open the doors and then have a deck, you know, where that calabash tree is there,
right?
Just wrapping something with maybe like a railing around it. And that idea had been pitched to council back when we were first talking about putting a restaurant in that space. Even though the restaurant didn't happen, you know, there's still been kind of talk behind the scenes of possibly wanting to put that deck out there. So if Of course, any one of these things can be taken out. It's not, this is just a proposed use of that reissuance of the bond.
So each of those items is actually stands individually. They are not dependent on each other. There is no special discount one way or another if something is being taken out or put it up. Okay.
Right. So for example, in the case of the Flagler Grove turf and the case of the Upper Garden, and I don't think we have a grant. No, we don't have a grant. Do we have a grant for the Coral Pine Park, Angela? No. So those two that I just mentioned have grants that are being parlayed for those improvements. We had another $500,000 that had been set aside with the state to redo the whole upper terrace. And then the state wrote that off the budget. So there's no money. We would have had to match that amount. The state killed that project, so we don't have that project, but that could potentially be another large scale project that is also necessary at the gardens at some point in the near future. Okay.
You'll see, I only have one kind of a general comment on the whole thing. That we are living in a COVID world, and it's kind of a little bit uncertain. And I actually started to do research regarding, because even Fauci and other people say the COVID is going to stay with us, and we don't, even if we have vaccine, we don't know the vaccination, and so effectively I think is some way we have to rethink about how enclosed space is going to work and what type of equipment and improvements you have to do around that. So my biggest concern is that, for example, able to utilize our community center long term, we might have to do the most efficient HEPA filters. We have to run ACs, because currently, there are multiple theories going on how you can make an enclosed space safe. And having HEPA filter, having UV lights on it, so you have a very upgraded AC system which runs 24/7, no matter what.
Right.
It's going to increase our cost, and maybe spend millions of dollars actually to replace all the ACs which capable of such services. I'm just, I'm not saying I know anything. I don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows. I think there are certain studies and everything is happening around that. So I am just wanted to make sure that before we start to spend money, we wanted to make sure that if we have to make sure that our buildings will be COVID proof, because if I read studies regarding what they think about how we're going to be in 2025. Even the experts is like all over the places.
Right.
And I think
those improvements can be built into the construction documents for any facilities. So we know, for example, like our existing facilities, any upgrades to anything we already have that's being done directly because of COVID is reimbursable by the federal government or the CARES Act. So if we wanted to do upgrades, that would be coming from a different source of money.
That's the good stuff, but the last time I see that the CARES Act is allocated to the county and a county decide to give or not to give, as we saw that, they are playing game all the time, whatever they want to play.
They have set aside $100 million for the municipalities, and it's a competitive process, and we've already submitted, I don't know, I want to say $3 million worth of eligible costs to try to get some of that back into Pinecrest. So,
but in this case, I really, because if you think you can actually source from there, I'm actually happy, because in this case you don't have to spend our money for that. But I actually I'm going to send you some studies and some recommendation or building recommendation how you should actually upgrade that one, because I think is the biggest important thing for actually all the enclosed space, air conditioning and air movement and anything else. And whenever you wanted to build anything in Pinecrest Garden, I know that you wanted to build those additional building in the back, which is like whatever. I think I really wanted to make sure, even if you do that, doing in a way that you can open up the whole door, so like air movement is happening, so you don't close enclosed space, because in the Cypress Hall in the other side of it, where you actually usually have your strategic meeting. What is the
Hibiscus Gallery? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the AC over there is horrible. You know that.
We're redoing that. We're getting ready to redo that.
It's cold, stinky.
That's all coming out.
Yeah. Okay. I've been there a couple of times, sitting through all of those 8 hours meeting per day, So, and
you're
it
gonna
was
love
not
it. It's
fun.
gonna come out in the next 2 months. All that is getting redone. So you'll love
Good.
it.
It was horrible. So anyway, so in this case, I wanted to make sure that you actually invest into the most efficient AC system money can buy, because if you have to run 24/7, your cost going to go up. But at least if you do that, actually is do it that way.
Right.
And my other comment is what I'm really missing from the project, as I know, is actually I was hope that we will have some solar initiative and green initiative which has actual ROI on it.
So the solar stuff, I'll mention just because you love this stuff, and you know it's just I know that you
Yes, I do.
and I do too. So solar stuff gets paid out of a different fund. It comes out of the sustainability fund. And our sustainability fund is funded through the development that are paying for expedited permits. The monies that are generated for those expedited permits go into sustainability fund. And we have an ongoing list of projects that are sustainable projects, including putting solar panels on the entire municipal center. So we've already installed the brackets, and we're just waiting for it to build up to $300,000 so that we can move forward with the installation of solar panels. And like that, we have a list of ongoing projects that we're just taking off using the sustainability fund. So that stuff is happening, but that happens in a different fund. And so it's not built into this, but we definitely, by the way, we just got our LEED certification for our community center project. So we do still care, and we're still doing stuff that's sustainable, even though you might not hear about it in the budget, but that is happening. Yeah.
I need a couple of chats. Somebody actually said in the chats, I don't know, you're actually following up, that is regarding that is the necessity to doing it right now, all of these things, because we are in a very uncertain time for multiplier perspective. I think that's the, but again, I think this political thing, we have to address it, our elected officials.
Right.
But I think it's like, it's like, is it really, what happened if we're waiting for a year for everything? Because like, I'm not, mostly I am, we can say that whatever you want to do the projects, and I have some opinion, but I'm mostly not against any of those, or some, it's like I have some opinion, but I'm going to express it not to you.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think it's like, shouldn't we wait for a year, actually see how everything is developed, that if the economy is tanking more, we may actually have more advantageous opinion for us. And I understand that we may lose some fund. If we're doing that, we're going to lose some 200K.
We would be losing, to give you an idea, unless council found the monies otherwise, if we didn't move forward with the Flagler Grove turf facility, for example, that's $400,000 we would be leaving on the table. If we don't move with the Pinecrest Gardens upper garden, we would be leaving at this point, because we have additional grants coming in that are in addition to what we already have, about $300,000 on the table. So they're large sums of money. Does it mean that we can't walk away from it? We can. We've done it before. We've had to walk away from grants before because the timing just didn't work for us. So there's nothing that says that council can't pump the brakes. They can. My recommendation is not to do that, because I feel that because there's revenue decreases on the use as it is, there's less people using our facilities. So we're gonna, presume these repairs, okay, arguably have to happen at some level, maybe not the level that you may not agree with what is being pitched from a vision, ultimate vision, but repairs do have to happen at these facilities, whether they cost $1 million or $4 million is up for discussion. However, the timing, when we do construction, you basically have to shut down, that has a huge impact on our park facilities. You shut it down, you can't have people in certain areas. So just from a logistics and construction logistics purpose, the timing to coincide when less people are using these facilities, and we already have a downturn in our revenues that we can generate from the rentals of these things, all those things, you can parlay that to attenuate the long-term double whammy if we waited. That's why, financially speaking, when you look at our financial stability as a village, the forecasting that we've done, you know, deep dive, looking at estimates, really cutting back on revenues we know are forecasting already low, and we're bringing it down, you know, 25-30% in some cases. We've used all that already into our 5-year, 10-year forecast. And so, and we've identified that, yes, there is going to be an economic downturn that's going to impact and suppress, for example, sales taxes, things like that, for 2 years. That's all built into our forecasts. Even with all of that, we also know that our growth in the construction side and our taxable value growth is not impacted by pandemics. Now, throw in a hurricane, category 5 hurricane, you know, Andrew size type thing, all bets are off. That's a huge variable that can happen, that can potentially impact that revenue source. But the impacts of the pandemic on our current revenue sources are very different, for example, in Pinecrest than Miami Beach, where a large portion of their revenues is based on the hospitality and tourism industry. We don't have those impacts because it's just a function of Pinecrest and the way that our revenues are not affected by the pandemic. And the other just stroke of luck, coincidentally, that occurred that has worked in our favor is the franchise fee for the FPL, because that was completely new. I know you hated it, and I get what the point is, but coincidentally, I couldn't have planned it better. Let's put it to you that way. Because it helped that particular fund and new revenue really has made a difference for us. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't be having this discussion, you know.
I have a couple of questions about these projects.
Sure.
In regards to Coral Pines Park,
Mm-hmm.
the phase 1 and the phase 2, all those things were looked at almost 6 years ago.
Right.
And I would agree that our world is different today than what we envisioned our buildings to be back then.
Right.
So I understand the cost for construction documents, but I would think that we have to completely revisit how that might look, how our community wants it to be. Do we want another enclosed building that maybe can't be used? I don't know. And it seems like, you know, for me, I can understand maybe a cost for some redesign, but I don't understand a cost for moving forward with a project right now. So that would be one thing on that field.
Okay.
On the gardens, so I had a conversation with a council member, and they said, well, it impacts 1/4 of the gardens cannot be used when this construction is going in for this project.
Right.
And we all know that if the council agreed to this bond in September, that it takes, or at least historically, it has taken several months to get the bond. And then you've got your bids, even if you do them at the same time. And so construction logically wouldn't even begin till maybe spring.
So no, what's happened behind that?
I'm very hopeful that the gardens will be open, and you guys have done such a great job managing the money that even if we're impacted, let's say we opened the gardens, but then we had to close down part of it because we started this construction, whether it's in December or it's in June, that obviously we can weather it being closed for a period of time, whether it was open or it was closed. So I don't see the urgency where, oh, it's not being used right now, it's got low usage, so it's low impact, when really, obviously, we can sustain that impact at any time.
Correct. I agree with you. I think the one thing that we leave on the table is the grant money. The grant money has to be used by April. So we have, the construction documents are moving forward. We have had discussions on whether or not to move forward with the project, the financing plan to move the project now this is the only option. So if council does not do this and decides not to do this, then they'll be understanding that either we walk away from the grant funding that we have, or that whatever is built is going to have to be something completely just kind of like what we did when we first purchased the property. Just put a regular playground structure up, use the same, restroom facility that's there, and maybe I can, change it up, make it a little pretty, zhuzh it up, fix it a little bit. Nothing, you know what I'm saying? Like, just if at all, if they wanted to go forward, because they may just decide to just return the money. You go to the state, you tell them thanks, but we're not going to take it right now. And then we can reapply for a grant in the future, and actually likely, because we scored well on this one, we would potentially be able to you just don't know if there'll be money available at the state when and if we needed it then. So those are really the considerations that council has to make when they talk about this. When we do strategic planning.
Yeah, and when does the $400,000 grant expire?
The $400,000 is not for another year. So that one is through April 2022, because that one is a newer grant.
I mean, for me is actually, if I look at it, you'll see that that the flagler one, we're getting 400K, is effectively getting 50% of the project is financed.
Right.
One.
So that's showing on the revenue side. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. That's the reason I know that's the reason you cannot reduce it here, because that's how you do it, because that's accounting and that's how you should do it.
Right.
Perfectly fine. The second thing is what I wanted to say, that that's the reason I think I would be happy if it's not retiring. I don't care about that one, because it's like that one is an impactful thing.
Right.
On the Pinecrest Garden, 300K is, it's about 8% about the whole total project, which with 300K is 300K. So I'm not discounting, but it's totally different scale if you're talking about for project to project. Right. If you have to make a decision that, hey, not doing a flag grove is actually the sin of not doing it. Okay, so it's like it's actually ultimate sin not to doing it. On the Pinecrest Garden, I think this is the difference is not that big, but you know what? I think Pinecrest Garden I think it will be a generational thing. We're going to build it to our children. Actually, my children now. Because Lily just 18 years old now, so it's like, so I think that is actually building it for the future.
Right.
So I think everybody community has to say, hey, what we want to do with our children's, okay? Here, so that's a kind of a decision. But and when we want to do it, I think that's the only thing is here, which is.
Right. I get it. And listen, I know some of you, I don't know, I can't see everybody that's on the call, but obviously, Daniel and Sherry and I are good friends. So we have these conversations. I know that we might be boring everybody else on the call, but, these are just suggestions. Council obviously can make and choose and not agree necessarily with me. In fact, some of these things I bring back years later because they said no to me once. And then, they send me back to the drawing board, like do more research on this. And then it takes a year. So that happens all the time. So yes, this is really for you to just know what's in the budget. Now, you guys from a political standpoint, and then off the line, I'm happy to tell you my personal opinion. And for those of you that are very close with me, I'm happy to tell you why and have the friendly discussions and the debate on why I think this is the right thing to do right now. Otherwise, I would not be recommending it. But I do respect your opinions, and obviously,
Which can differ. I think it's about assessing certain situations. We can actually be more conservative. You know that. You know me. I'm always more conservative. I like to have sitting a lot of cash.
I'm conservative, and we'll go through so you could see also the financial perspective of the city and why I believe this is the right thing to do now. But again, I'm not I don't know everything. So people can have different opinions.
And you're not a politician, okay?
That's right. So. Okay, let's move on if you don't mind. So what we just went over was a general fund. We do fund accounting. So we have multiple different, silos or bank accounts for different purposes, different revenues that can only be used for certain purposes and not for other purposes. So we just went over general fund and capital fund. Now we're looking at some of the other larger funds that we have, which are stormwater utility fund, transportation fund, and CITT fund. So these funds, like I said, are paid for through special revenues that can only be used for certain purposes. So the stormwater utility fund is the monies that go into that fund come from what residents pay through their stormwater utility fees. And these funds can only be used for drainage type projects. Okay, so we get a finite amount of money comes in and we try to spend all that money to build new drainage projects. The drainage projects and the decision on what the projects are going to be are informed by a stormwater utility master plan that was done for the village that identified in total about $40 million worth of drainage needs for Pinecrest. Over the next 10 years, the village, because of what we charge for stormwater utility, can only accomplish approximately $12 million of drainage projects out of the coffers of the monies generated by stormwater utility fees. That's not to say that we can't go after some grant funding. Like right now, because of the pandemic, there's a lot of monies that are going to be coming down the pike from the feds for infrastructure and resiliency type projects. So we're going to be going after large sums of money, and hopefully we land some of that, and we can expedite the completion of the remaining, 40, or rather, what is it, $28 million worth of projects. The transportation fund, again, funding that goes into this is local option gas taxes that must be used, half-cent sales tax that must be used for transportation type projects. So the expenditures here are not specific to really any project. They're just placeholders. We know we typically will go through these things. We did complete a transportation master plan that was a village-wide master plan. And so we are slowly going through that master plan. Every year, council gets proposed projects based on the recommendations of that master plan. And then with, X amount of money that might be in there, whatever is not used is rolled over, and it's just kept in that fund as balance, and then it gets rolled over for the following year to be used.
I have a question about the sidewalk, because you have miscellaneous sidewalks, 60,000 under transportation
placeholders,
fund, and then sidewalk improvements, CITT, $100,000.
Just placeholders, not anything that's particularly set aside. Some of the projects, for example, that council has mentioned an interest in doing would be, they've asked me to look at redoing the sidewalk on 67th Avenue and making that a shared use path, widening it and making that a shared use path on 67th Avenue. They've asked for me to look at 57 Kendall Drive and do.
I think it was Kendall Drive, because Doug actually was favored to doing on a Kendall Drive to actually make a pilot on it. So let's see how it works. So based on that, we can.
Both the discussions during the strategic planning workshops has been both. It's been 67th Avenue because that already has a sidewalk, and at one point used to have asphalt, and then it would, and then Kendall would be something new. So that can be used for that. The other thing, we use sidewalk money. Sometimes we do repairs over the course, sparingly. There's areas in the transportation master plan, Sherry, if you remember, that there were missing links of sidewalks. So that would be miscellaneous places where we would spend the sidewalk. There is no interest in doing sidewalks in the residential neighborhoods.
I want one.
I know.
I want one.
Good luck.
I want one on 62 Avenue.
Good luck. Good luck.
I know.
All right. Moving on. Okay, this is just a general snapshot on what the average person pays to Pinecrest, depending on their taxable value. The average home in Pinecrest, from a taxable value perspective, is at $833,000. So a person that has a home that is taxable valued at $833 is paying just shy of $2,000 to the village. They'll pay more to the rest, because if you remember, the first slide we started with had like $18 per 1,000. Sherry, I know you're taking notes. If you want a copy of this, I'll send it to you. That's not a problem. Okay, ad valorem taxes with millage. This is the nitty gritty. This is what happens for every 10 cents of new millage. You can generate $489,000 roughly. And the rollback rate would generate roughly $250,000 less in ad valorem taxes than what we anticipate if we were to roll it back instead of leaving it at this 2.399.
I wanted to make a comment here, if it's possible, Yossi, because I think that you brought up the FPNL money.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember last year you wanted to actually reduce the rate to 2.3.
Right.
And I was the person who actually said not do it because at that time we have a lot of FEMA money out there. We never got it back. So I just wanted to make sure that we were reserved. So I said I disagreed actually reducing the tax when we actually don't have the revenue. And also the second thing was actually in discussion and has been held because of the whole FPNL franchise fee discussion was that, hey, that's not a tax increase. We just wanted to, the reason we wanted to do the FPNL franchise agreement to actually diversify our revenue for bond rating perspective. So in this case, easier for us to do bonding. And I think that was the, that's the two reasons. And those an implicit and even explicit agreement, that we're not going to use this as a tax rate increase. So for me, the purpose of this whole, and this was said, you said it on a dais about that. So I was kind of a little bit disheartened that I haven't seen that. I see the new revenue, which is about, I think is about $700,000 more you're getting from FPNL, which is effectively the same what you would get from under the old franchise agreement, which is effectively the tax increase on the residents. So I said, hey, let's give that back to the residents because they're paying from another revenue source. So for me, that was actually the kind of a thing that, hey, we have done it in the last year. You proposed it decrease.
It can be done this year because we have a surplus. So can we lower taxes? The answer to that question is yes. And,
I mean, I know, I'm not actually, this is not, I don't want to lower the taxes because I am a guy who wanted to lower the taxes no matter what, and I killed the revenue of the government. I'm not, I really want good service and everything else. I really felt that was a discussion between the residents and everybody else. This was a trade-off. We understand that you need this revenue perspective to have a new revenue stream to actually increase our bond rating. I'm totally fine with that. I mean, I hated the contract for a totally different reason. And you know that, and I have voiced it because I feel that, but again, this is not for that purpose. But again, it's like, in my opinion, it's like, you should give back, the council should give back something, but I understand that we might have to lobby it on their level on this one. But I think that's kind of the fair trade-off between the public when when the whole agreement has been proposed and the government. I think that's what I wanted to see that, and I understand it. I may have to make my case to the elected officials.
I will tell you, Daniel, without a doubt, that had we not had a pandemic, I would have been recommending a tax decrease, without a doubt. Okay. I know that for a fact because that was where we were heading, and I knew that we could do that, and that was what I was planning on doing. The pandemic totally changed everything because if we had been going with the trends and the revenue increases that we would have been anticipating, we could have easily had a tax decrease this year.
I mean, I think this is just a fair trade of what we agreed and what we have discussed. Okay. And
I think the pandemic kind of changed a little bit because it was a variable we didn't see coming, but like I said, there is room because we do have a surplus showing. So if council wanted to do that, and that's their, their decision, discussion, it can be done.
You put because it's like a little bit. This is kind of what you said that is a little bit inconsistent. And I'm not. If you bought that, hey, we wanted to let's spend $8 million for projects, but we are the revenue. We have all that whole uncertainty here. So either one of them is true. Both of them cannot be true in my opinion.
I respectfully disagree with you.
Okay.
It's all about what the goals are for the council. Does the council want to build reserves? Do they want to have surplus or not? Do they want to have a little wiggle room
okay,
or
okay,
not?
I got you. Okay, I give you that.
Financially, right, financially, respectfully, I would argue that we're in good financial stable. Even with the pandemic, we can make.
No, we are. Actually, no, I'm not.
Right.
I know, I agree. I read through the 200 something pages document. You know, I always read through the whole thing. So I think I'm not really debating we are financially in a okay place.
Right. Now it's an issue of where they want to be as a body. Last year, if you recall, they wanted to try to build, well, you said it.
I was the one actually fighting for it because I said, don't give up the money, what we didn't collect it, because that was a mayor said, oh, we wanted to decrease it because of we're going to have the FP&R money. But I actually said, yes, but at that time we didn't have the money. I said, why decrease the tax when you don't have the money?
Right.
But now we have the money. And, you know, I think that's actually a fair trade-off between the government and the public.
Yeah.
To do that. But I am not, you know, that's the only thing I just kind of wanted to call your attention on that one.
I get it. Yeah, we can definitely, if that's what council wants to do, we can shift gears like that. That's fine. All right. This particular slide shows you what is happening with regards to our general fund balance. The dark blue is what is tied to a FEMA appeal. That FEMA appeal is about $1.5 million worth of expenditures that the village incurred that have yet to be collected in connection with Hurricane Irma. So we have submitted the appeal. That appeal was submitted in December. We have been advised by State Department of Emergency Management that we're likely to see a response from FEMA next year. They have about, I don't know, 75, 80 other appeals ahead in the list, and the supposed 90-day turnaround that they're supposed to do according to their own rules, they don't follow. So we will not have a response on FEMA for another year. On the positive side, the State Emergency Management Division that reviewed the appeal has submitted that with a favorable recommendation. The process for FEMA appeal, in the event that they rejected that appeal, which I don't believe they will for a lot of reasons, but which I won't get into now, but anyone that wants to know the information, I'm happy to share with you. There's a second appeal that involves going before a 3-person judge panel in which we would be filing and making our case. And I'm comfortable saying that we can convince them because they're legitimate. Nobody pocketed this money. This was legitimate expenditures and that we can document. So I feel confident that we will see this money, but it will likely not be coming back to us for another year. With that said, you'll note that even if you were to deduct that money, let's say that we wrote it off, Daniel, I know you mentioned just writing it off. Even if we were to do that, if you look at the anything that's in the light colored below that dark color blue, that is where our reserves would be, which is not off from what we traditionally have kept since our inception as a city.
I actually wanted to make this comment because, you know, I was the person who has said that write this off. And if you're getting if they treat it like a grant money, if you get it, it's great. If you don't get it, is
we don't count on it. I show it on the book so that you all understand we're not, this is not, and there's another slide I'll show you now where this falls and how this impacts the best practices set aside that we have for, you know, emergency set aside and the 10%. None of this can be written off. I personally don't feel we should because I am confident we will get this money back. But you know
I mean, I want to, because I see that our reserve is actually get to almost back to the $8 million level. It's like 7.5, something like that, around that. So I think I understand where you are coming from, which I'm happy that our reserve, we were able to brought it up to the level, which is it's there for safety. And I told you, I always like to sit on a lot of cash.
Right.
And that's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, because we discussed about that is, if we're going to lose the case on the court, do we have another recourse or not?
No, if we lose, if they deny the appeal.
So I will be very specific. Can we have our insurance, liability insurance money? You can take over that one?
No, we lose this, we lost that money. That came out of our emergency monies, you know what I mean? And that's why we have the emergency reserve for. But we're not going to lose that money. And the reason we're not going to lose that money, very simply put, is that FEMA already paid the same expenditures for different portions of time. So why would they pay this portion and this portion for the same exact expenditures and not this portion?
But Yossi, we are talking about the federal government. Okay?
I'm telling you, but even if they said no, even if some bureaucrat at the federal government said no, this would have to go before a judge, a 3-person judge panel, and I am confident that we're not going to have a no.
I wanted to kind of tell you a story, and you may tell me I'm wrong, because you know that the president actually redirected now almost all the FEMA money for the $300 unemployment benefits. I know that he might get sued, and in this case, all the FEMA money will be gone. So even if you expect for it, we may not even get it because those money will be spent. So, and you know, if the president stay in power, as is it, and those judges will be his nominees, you may have no chance actually to even.
I believe that our president, if this president remains as president, that he will be supportive of people who have undergone, you know, emergencies and understands, you know, I don't believe it's a presidential issue. I believe these are bureaucracies that unfortunately have a lot of red tape that has come about because of fraud, right? And these checks and balances that they put is because there was a lot of theft involved during Katrina. We unfortunately are suffering the new rules that have been very onerous, but I feel confident that these are legitimate, obviously legitimate expenditures that we can document. And
I know
I have
we
to believe
did.
that it'll get
I'm not
reimbursed.
questioning that because I know that I went through those things.
Right.
Because when I say that, because this money originally was like $3.5 million, or which
Right.
they were not paying. So it was actually
Little by little,
the public
it's
actually
trickling in.
the year by year.
Yeah.
I saw that how much money you recovered. So I see you recovered more than $2 million already.
Yeah. I'm
So
concerned that it takes this long, that it's 3 years since and we're still waiting for money, because that is the problem. The issue that I'm concerned about is the turnaround time for these things, but I'm being told that they're gonna somehow magically make this process a lot more, you know, faster with the CARES Act and all this other stuff. Anyway, okay, moving on.
Okay, I'm sorry. You know,
Don't get me started. FEMA, I'm not a FEMA fan.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, total available resources. This is just a snapshot of where we've been historically with regards to our revenues and then our general fund expenditures. We tend to really stay on target. Obviously, in the beginning of our existence, there was a lot more wiggle room. We had a lot more playroom than we do now, especially since the recession of 2008, where things got really tight. Here, this is basically shows you traditionally the difference between what we budget and what we've actually spent to run the village. And so ever since the recession of 2008, we've obviously run a much tighter operation where you have, you know, traditionally less than 5% difference between what was budgeted and then what actually audited spent was. And this is just another chart that shows you the general fund balance that we've used in the past to pay for capital projects. This year, we're only proposing about $184,000 worth for capital projects that are not included in that bond. So this is not bond related stuff. These are other projects. Okay, this is the one that I wanted to show you. So what you're seeing in this chart, just to explain, you have the general fund balance, what we carry on our books in blue. The green is what was the cost, the total cost of what we spent in connection with Hurricane Irma. back in 2017-18, the set aside for hurricanes was $2 million. We bumped that to $3 million because we realized that the cost of hurricane recovery stuff has gone up. So we bumped that to $3 million in 2019-20. That's why you see the red line is the set aside for hurricane, and then also recommended set aside of 10% of our operating budget, as well as another 317,000 in reserves that's set aside for increases in insurance. If there were to be increases in employee premiums and insurance premiums, that this would cover it. So as what this basically is showing you with all that said is, at a minimum, best practices in order to maintain our AAA bond rating, we have to maintain a minimum of $5.8 million worth of reserves. We're above that amount. And if you were to take, so for example, at the end of next year, we're anticipating 8.6 in reserves, 1.5 of which is tied up in the FEMA appeal. So you can, subtract that and you would still have close to $7 million, 7.1 million in reserves. Okay. All right. And finally, this is my final slide. This is just a pie chart that shows you where the Pinecrest mill rate falls in comparison to the other taxing jurisdictions. And so what you'll notice is that you pay to Pinecrest and all that we provide as far as services, the same amount that you pay as taxpayers to the Miami-Dade just fire rescue service. And then the other two large taxing jurisdictions are Dade County and the library and the school board, where you pay the majority of your taxes to. Okay. All righty then. What time is it? Well, I've been talking for an hour and 47 minutes. So
I have a question about your last slide that really takes us back to one of your earliest slides with the millage rates of the different municipalities.
Right.
On here, it shows the county fire at 2.4207, which we pay. When you were showing us all the different millage rates in Key Biscayne, it was listed at 3.2187, but that, if you deducted our millage that we pay for fire, the 2.4207, that would mean their residents are only paying 0.07980.
Correct.
Property values.
Correct.
Let's do that.
I have recommended that in past lives. I have recommended that, but that's not my decision. I can only make recommendations.
I'm just saying that, it's never going to go away.
Yes, I used to work for Key Biscayne. For those of you who don't know, I started my career in Key Biscayne. I was their assistant manager, and I happened to be one of the people that oversaw the transition and creation of the fire rescue department in Key Biscayne. I did my capstone project for my master's on fire rescue at Key Biscayne, so I am very well versed, and I was married to a firefighter paramedic in my prior life. So that is definitely something that would provide arguably some savings, but from a political perspective, the elected officials have looked at that particular concept, to my recollection, at least 3 times, and have just decided to keep the status quo. But it's not to say that it can't be revisited in the future at any time. So.
It took 10 years to get the sidewalk on 60th Avenue, so I think it's okay to revisit it upon
council will, I'm sure, future councils, like we joke amongst ourselves, some of us, John, I love seeing you. I haven't seen you in such a long time. Some of us that have been here a long time, we sometimes feel it's Groundhog Day, because the ideas, circle back every 5 or 6 years. We see it come back around, so we know, we joke about it. But yeah, definitely something worth potentially visiting in the future again. So All right.
And I had a question about the attorney's expense. It went up $90,000.
No, actually they lost, they went down. Hold on. Let me give you.
Did I see that it went from something to 455?
Hold on. I have the budget here. I think this is the budget. Give me a second. Okay, in the budget, no, the village attorney went down. We decreased, hold on, let me get to the, and again, I just FYI, you want to definitely look at the next version of it that's coming out tomorrow with the changes. The village attorney. I did want to show you guys something. Okay, hold on. Village attorney. Village attorney is going from 505 to 445. See that?
Oh, but we're spending 355 this year.
We've only spent 355 this year. This year we had a low use, but it's also because all the COVID related expenditures from the attorneys is being not hitting the general fund because it's reimbursable by FEMA. So it doesn't get hit their expended account. So those are coded into a different, from a financial perspective, they're going to be paid from a different sort of pot of money. So the expenditure is not being shown here.
FEMA or the CARE Act?
That's coming from FEMA. FEMA will reimburse that.
Okay.
And then CARES will reimburse the 12.5% local match. CARES will cover. Okay. The other last slide I wanted to just show everyone, so you guys, since I think the large discussion that for the budget this year is going to center around the debt and whether or not to do let me just go over the debt service information. So everybody, if you have questions, you feel free to ask me. And I'm always available to answer questions after this meeting also. If there's anything that you think about after you've had a chance to go through everything. Hold on. Angela, does debt service come before these or after?
After, it's almost the last one. Keep going.
Okay. So this particular chart is on page X1 of the budget document. This is a good one for everyone that's interested in the discussion of the bond. These are the bonds that we have currently outstanding for the village. We have 5 different bonds. The one that we're talking about retiring early is the one that was Parrot Jungle and Gardens bond that is otherwise due to retire in 2022, which would be the following fiscal year. Our financial policies, written financial policies, do allow for surplus funding to be used or reserves to be used to retire debt early because of the changes that'll be coming and provided to you guys by tomorrow, and the new budget worksheets that are going out to council. We originally thought we would have to dip into reserves to come up with that payment. We don't have to. Sherry, something I forgot to mention to you on the timing of the bond issuance, we would not be issuing the bond in September. It would have to be issued in February for the plan to work so that we don't have to go into reserves. So you know how the timing, depending on when you issue the bond, is when you get the first principal payment, and by doing it in February, so we would, assuming council went forward with the projects, we would continue going forward with the projects, but we would be upfronting monies for the initial 2 or 3 months of construction, assuming that we can get construction started by November or December, and then we would be issuing the bond in February. Okay, because that's the only way it works to get this to work from a one hit in the budget next year. Otherwise, we would have multiple payments too.
What rate do you expect it is going to be, Yossi?
I think the last time that we looked at this, the rates were at, oh my God, Angela, see
I
if
just want to make sure that.
I think the last time we looked at it, it's less than 2. It's like less than 2%.
What's the savings on interest that for paying it off early?
It's minimal because you have to pay some fees, you know, like processing fees. So I don't know that I don't even think it amounts to $30,000. It's not, there's no savings in retiring it early. All this does is allows us, it's a financing mechanism to move the other projects forward. That's really, it's just a financing plan if they wanted to continue at the pace that we were talking about. Anything other than that, you know, it's all fluid. The next bond that would be retiring would be the one that retires in 2024, which would, in that case, then, you know, provide for roughly $200,000 worth of funding that could be used to either reissue another bond at that point or for whatever reason. So, all right, any questions on any of this stuff? I know it's a lot of information, and for those of you who are not used to coming to these meetings, I was going to go through some of the chat comments just because I haven't been reading. Okay, let me see if there's anything I haven't responded to. Have you been monitoring the chat, Angela, to see? Okay, higher because it includes fire. Yes, we talked about that. That looks good. Looks like that's what it looks like. Yes, is a red light amount less expenses? Yes, it's no. The revenue is revenue, and then the expenditure is already built into the budget for the cameras. It shouldn't be. However, it's an interesting question.
You'll see, Marie responded. She said the last interest rate she got was a 2.3.
Okay.
She expects it to be better. That was a while ago.
Okay.
It's down since then.
So there was no increase on attorney share.
Right.
Okay. Can you please explain the merit increase? Okay. So the merit increase is we have 3-year contract collective bargaining contracts with both our police union and our police officer unions and sergeants unions that negotiated through that 3-year contract a merit increase and salary increases that total 5%. So in the case of our police department, because they are governed by collective bargaining agreements, those are agreed upon costs, and regardless of what happens in the economy, we are obligated to pay that. The general government employees are not part of a union. Traditionally, we have taken the position that, and in light, it's really been strategic in a way to avoid the creation of additional unions, because once you do one for one group and you don't do for the other, all that does is then get the other people riled up to get their own unions. So we typically just try to provide, if we can afford it, the same benefits that the police officers negotiate to the rest of the employees. What is the interest savings proposed retire bond? We talked about how long have we been paying on it only to renew it, so to speak, at the original amount. We've been paying, it was a 20-year bond, and it was an $8 million bond. We were recommending replacing it for the same amount of money. So basically the debt service payment will be roughly the same that we've already have built into the budget. Was Evelyn Greer Park funds in the last bond for improvements?
I thought we had the playground in the last bond.
We had the resurfacing of that. We didn't have the playground structure. Okay. What we were planning to do was change out some of the older features of the playground, not the entire playground. But when we went to the manufacturer, they told us they would not replace those parts that need replacing. And then when you added the issue of the tent that was put in after that playground was done, that big pole in the middle threw off all the safety stuff. It just wasn't done really the way we should have done it, quite frankly. But, you know, so if we want to do it with the safety standards today, that would be the recommendation, is just to go ahead, put in something new, and then just redo the whole thing, including the new tent structures and everything. 18, the bond was purchasing. Okay. John, I join in your expense revenue concerns with Pinecrest Gardens. We are competing with attempting to with the Tropical Botanical Garden. Money uses duplicate is available through Fairchild. My hand is up to engage and assist to bring the cost down and revenue up. Okay. To renew it at the original amount seems to be an overreach. We originally were supposed to pay it off and move on with less debt. That's a good comment. Thank you very much. I have to excuse myself. Okay. Can we use the 212 expected excess to fund some of the cap projects and hold off on the big tickets till after New Year? Yeah, if council says yes, it can be done. My microphone is not working. This is Debbie. I would like to know why this needs to happen right now in such a difficult, uncertain time in life. To your point, Sherry, in the new year, there may be clarity. Debbie, there's like, I always tell my, these people obviously are my friends. So I tell them with all love, yes, you can make arguments on both sides of this. It's really, an educated opinion on my part because I've been working on budgets, so I feel comfortable. But at the end of the day, the elected officials are the ones that need to feel comfortable with these decisions, not me. And so they'll listen to what you have to say and their concerns, and then that'll inform the process, and we adjust accordingly. If they want to pump brake, then that's what we'll do.
I made one suggestion to the council members that I told them I would say to you, and maybe I'm just dunning my brain down, in that if there was a separate tab or individual sheet that addressed the budget in regards to COVID for this past year and how you think it will affect us in the coming year, knowing those things that have had improvements, because I think for us, sometimes people don't want to read the whole document, but they do kind of want to know what happened. And I saw it woven into your narrative. Mm-hmm. But again, it's just dunning it down, and it's fine. It would just, because I think it's such a plus when people read it as far as what we've done in Pinecrest.
So for those that stuck around for my long explanation, I'll tell you real quick, the first 6 months of this year before the pandemic hit, we were blowing away all our money, our revenues were, bettering what we had anticipated. And so had that trend continued, Daniel, there's no question that we could have lowered taxes in a really good way, because things were really humming. Our programs at the park, we've been going through a lot of things. So all that has been building on itself. The COVID put a screeching halt to all those years of building, like the community center. We were finally going to be in the black, all these things were happening, and we were moving it. And then this just put a damper on it. So what's basically happened is the second half of the fiscal year didn't completely screech to a halt. The first month we were like, oh my God, what is this going to do? We thought it was going to be a lot worse. So when we're looking at the revenues coming in from all the different revenue sources, we actually anticipated it to look a lot worse. Some of the reasons we are now having surplus is because when I was going through the budget, I was tightening a lot because I was like, okay, this is going to get really ugly. So we actually got surprises when we started getting monies from the state and telling us what we were going to get, because we anticipated it was going to be a lot worse than it is. So in our case, we're doing a lot better than what we thought we were going to do, because just our revenue, like I said, it's not affected the same way through the pandemic. The biggest thing affected by the pandemic in our revenue streams are the programs, and we're having to reinvent those programs. So it's not to say we're not going to do programs. We just got to do programs that are going to take into account the social distancing measures and the safety protocols. So we're just having to reinvent, abandon what we've always done, and then just come up with new ideas that are more innovative, doing a lot of virtual things. But we are, like our ballet is virtual, and we haven't really lost a lot of revenue from that because people actually are doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's just finding a new way of life. It's really interesting for me because I obviously love this kind of work. But anyway, thank you, Laura. Based on this, they don't plan moving with less debt, just replacing it. Yeah, my recommendation is replacing the debt. I'm not recommending lowering the debt. And we've had conversations offline with some folks that, we're in a good financial position. And as long as we have these funds available, my recommendation would be that we don't, we've had a lot of, because of the recession in 2008, there was a lot of needs maintenance wise that was put off for a long time. And so we're doing a lot of catch up that maybe we wouldn't have had to incur debt over, but because it would have been done spread out over time. But the 2008 recession forced us to really put a lot of those things off. And so I don't feel that lowering, you know, if we have the debt and we have the capacity to do it, that we should continue to do it, because that we're the stewards of these properties. So that would be my recommendation. But, you know, like, again, it's just, you know, it's for council to decide. I agree with you, Deborah. It seems a bit out of touch with our new reality. What is the expiration of these two grants? The one that I mentioned, the one for the Upper Garden is in April of next year. There will be other opportunities opening, perhaps even greater if construction is slowing. As she showed in the earlier slide, the pricing will be to our advantage. That's correct. This is why, that's another reason why to do this now, because construction cost is going to be decreasing. So when these things start going out to bid, there we are likely to get some savings from doing construction during the pandemic.
If you get savings, let's say that if you get significant savings, like $500,000 in this project, what do you want to do with this additional funds, what you can actually get? So you issued an $8 million bond, but you really can do the whole thing because of negotiating power and everything.
When you do these bonds, what you typically would do is you would provide the language in the bond that would leave the wiggle room that it could be used for other improvements to facilities. And so, you know, if at the end of the 3-year period, because you don't want to get kicked into arbitrage, you would just try to find other uses for that, whatever that may be. You know, U.S. Council has had long-term plans, vision plans for the US 1 corridor that we've never even touched. So I can come up with ideas. I'm not worried about finding ideas. I have. It's about whether council,
everybody like it. Everybody like your idea.
It's whether council thinks they're good ideas or not, you know. But I can come up with a lot of ideas. We could do license plate readers throughout the village. There's so many different things we could do that we don't have now. They're just amenities, but that would be for council to decide. If you read the breakdown of each revenue source, you will see a big decrease in many areas. Only ad valorem will be stable. Now she talks about FPL fee, but that is really a tax on residents. My bill will increase by $400 a year.
Yes, that's okay. What I addressed also.
Deborah, agree. Will you? Okay. Can we see a timeline of all grants, including amounts and expiration dates? Yes, I can. We can provide that. Ms. McNaughton, I'll make sure. Angela, can you make a note to get her that information on when these grants all retired? Excellent points, Sherry. Can we request a grant extension? Okay, so the issue of requesting grant extensions, I can tell you, traditionally you can. We've been told likely they won't be given because there's shortages at the state. And so any decommissioned grants will be taken back by the state and likely used to plug their holes. So the fact that we have existing grants with grant agreements in place has helped us, because had we not had those agreements already signed, we would have likely lost those grants. So, but Debbie, yeah, in other cases, we've had to ask for grants. Sometimes they give it, sometimes they don't. I think that if we've already started construction, even if we haven't finished construction, which we won't be able to finish it by April, that because it's already underway, they would likely give an extension. But if we hadn't started the project and this grant was awarded 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, at this point, they'll take the money away. That I can tell you. Okay, I think that's it. I don't have any other questions in here. So if anyone that's still on that wants to ask me any additional questions, I'm happy to entertain those. Otherwise, we are about 2 hours and 10 minutes into the presentation, and I'll be wrapping it up soon.
Did you calculate the discounted cash flow value base?
I'm sorry?
Have you done a calculation, a DCF calculation on these new bonds and the old bond? Because you're replacing an old bond, which was 18 years ago, had worth something, but on current valuation, that what was $8 million,
Yeah, no.
As $8 million is actually less. So
no, because the only thing that I'm looking at is bottom line, what the debt service amount is and what the impact is financially for X amount of money and what we can carry in our, you know, forecasting. So yes, the value in today's dollar is a lot less than obviously 20 years ago, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. At that time, that $8 million really was hitting our budget.
Right.
So
yes, the cost of, and that's another thing, like the idea of retiring debt, while it sounds good, the reality is the cost of doing these construction improvements only get more expensive over time. And so, you know, a lot of people have adversity to debt, and I you know, personally don't carry any debt. I pay all my credit cards the day I spend the money, and that's me. But you know, it's for long-term, you know, maintenance and being good stewards of the properties we do own. And Pinecrest Gardens in particular, and I don't want to be pitching because it's really not appropriate, but I will say that is the heart of Pinecrest. That is our #1 property. And we knew when we purchased it, as my former boss used to say, it's the black hole. Because it was not maintained the way it should. And it's going to be 100 years old in 15 years. That property has a lot of lingering issues, and we pumped a lot of money into it. And, you know, this is the last portion of that property that needs a little attention. And hopefully then we can, you know, breathe. The other part, like I mentioned, was the terrace. And I just keep hoping that the state will somehow come up with the $500,000 that we had in the budget that the governor vetoed out, unfortunately, for the terrace improvements.
Yeah, they actually vetoed out $650,000, which has been all the Senate and the Congress, everybody give it to us, but he always allowed the money.
I'm hopeful because all our reps are really behind it, and I think they're going to support it next legislative session. So hopefully we get lucky and we get it. So,
what has the community been saying to staff as far as what their concerns are and where they want their money spent as far as any outreach to them?
You know, we put out stuff in the sun. We don't really get a lot. You know what typically happens, you know this, you've been on the council. The people that typically are the most vocal are the ones that have concerns. The people, you know, just in a general sense, either are not paying attention or they trust the council enough that, you know, over the years we've had pretty stable, relatively speaking, considered, you know, when compared to other cities, we don't have a lot of controversial issues that come up. So I think people choose to stay, you know, on the sidelines. I don't know what to tell you, but that's been the case for my, you know, I've been here almost 20 years at this point. That is Pinecrest for you. You know, we have always some people. That's why I said I know the names, because some of you come to all these meetings and you're very active, but then we don't have a lot of active people in general in Pinecrest.
Right, but I think as when I was on the council, anytime you have a bond, you have a lot of interaction with people, and this is the second biggest bond we've ever had. So I certainly would expect that a lot of people, and I think that it's fair to say that the public's been absent because they have more important things to be concerned about. And personally, I was a little surprised because let's say all the projects are fabulous. I just personally am concerned that I thought the council would kind of move through our budget, be cautious during this time, knowing that the public is absent. And I kind of trusted them to just move forward in a normal way or a traditional way of a budget without going for the big bond at this time. And it sucks. I mean, all the work that goes into this and the planning and the staff and the discussions and council can decide, but I think it's fair to say we can all agree that the public's been absent reasonably so for the last 6 months. And so it does concern me, regardless of what the projects are. So I would hope that they pause for a few months while we're in the middle of hurricane season, while we're in the middle of a pandemic, as opposed to moving forward with a new $8 million bond. But that's my view.
Right.
And I don't think it would hurt. But everybody gets to choose. The elected officials can move forward with a brand new bond for $8 million while the public is absent. I do believe that strongly, without any discussion or judgment on any of the projects,
Right.
just because it seems prudent, but they're going to make that decision themselves politically.
Right. I will tell you that outreach, we are putting it again in the Sun in the next edition, which comes out September 1st. So people will be getting that before the budget hearings. And so, you know, I can only tell you what traditionally has happened. You know,
I know, but I do think the Pinecrest Sun, then if you're going to put it in and very specifically say, listen, we're in good financial shape, it's not going to change. Yes, we're keeping the millage the same, but we're going to spend $8 million on a new bond for these renovations, enhancements, whatever someone wants to call it, as opposed to it being listed in the Sun and saying, click this, go to your computer, click this, and then you can check it out, because people don't have time to do all that.
I will tell you that I was happy because even though 20 people didn't show up today to this meeting, but it was the most I've had anybody come to any of these meetings.
True.
So the Zoom, actually, the technology is really interesting because it does allow for people not to be able to do this from the comfort of their home instead of having to come out to the thing. So, you know, I'm perfectly open. Sherry, I'm glad, you know, you called in to have additional meetings to talk to staff, you know, and to the public and kind of give them information so that, you know, they could be informed and make whatever, you know, recommendations they wanted to the elected officials that, you know, I'm available for any of that. I'm happy to do it. But yeah, that, you know, people should be informed and they should know what's happening in there. But you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And some people just don't.
Yeah, but this is, yeah, but we could agree this is COVID. It is different.
Yeah, they're at home looking at computers all the time and could, you know, easily listen into all our meetings from the comfort of their home. They don't even have to come in person. So
right, I checked out all the agendas, and I think
they can avail themselves of that process. You know, you guys are very active. Not everybody, you know that. You know, you guys know everything inside and out. You've been here and you listen and you pay attention. Not everybody is as committed to this community, and they might love it. They love being, you know, focused on their families instead of government, and that's just, you know,
as they should.
It's how it is in Pinecrest, which is good. All right, Shannon, I saw you come off the thing. Did you want to ask me any questions? Did you have, or Mr. Spicer or Miss McNaughton? I know that you all are listening.
No, thank you very much.
You're
Great
welcome.
job.
Very informative.
Thank you. Harry, did you have any questions? I know he had sent me an email earlier that he had read everything, so I know he's been on top of it. Thank you, Mr. Baxter. I appreciate your compliment. Can you please email the presentation? Sure. Angela, can you make a note to email the people that were on the call, the presentation, so everybody can have that? All right. I guess Laura doesn't have the microphone, but and you can always call me Miss McNaughton if you have any questions. Same to you, Mr. Spicer. Mr. Patterson, did you have any questions? Or Mr. Baxter or Mr. Palugai? No? Okay, then it looks like everybody's turned off. All right, guys, so long night. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your time.
Sorry for taking your more time.
And your interest in Pinecrest. This is awesome. So, all right, talk soon. Take care.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank